Ceann Comhairle, I propose to answer questions 1 and 2 together. Following consultations with the opposition parties by the then Minister for Finance, the IBRC Commission of Investigation was established in June 2015. The Commission is entirely independent in its work, and Mr Justice Brian Cregan is the sole member. The Commission is required to investigate certain transactions, activities and management decisions at the IBRC in its first module, and is investigating the SiteServe transaction, which has been identified as a matter of significant public concern in Dáil Éireann. Deputies will recall that following the determinations made by the Commission that banker-client confidentiality and legal professional privilege applied in relation to certain documents supplied to it, the then Taoiseach and Kenny invited views from opposition parties on the issues arising, and following consultations with them, the Commission of Investigation, IBRC Act 2016, was enacted by the Oireachtas in July 2016. The Act is a bespoke piece of legislation which gave a new legal basis to the Commission's investigations. Deputies will also recall that arising from the issues raised by the Commission, its terms of reference were also amended by the Oireachtas in 2016, following consultations with opposition parties. Following requests from the Commission and further consultations with opposition parties, the timeframe for the Commission's report has been extended on several occasions. On the 23rd of November 2018, the Commission submitted its 5th interim report to me and requested a further extension of its deadline for reporting until the end of March 2020. I consulted with opposition representatives on this request, and there was a shared strong concern about the level of progress achieved by the Commission to date. The timeframe now proposed for concluding the first module of the Commission's work and the risks of further delays and cost escalations. It was therefore agreed to request a further interim report from the Commission under Section 33 of the Commission's Investigation Act 2004, with any interim findings or conclusions which the Commission is in a position to make at this stage, any options which the Commission believes would reduce the timeframe or the cost for production of a final report on the first module of the investigation, the Commission's view of risks to completion for the first module of the investigation within the requested new timeframe, that is the end of March 2020, and the Commission's best estimate of the likely final costs of the first module. I also extended the Commission's timeframe until the end of March 2019. A decision on any further extension of the Commission's timeframe will be taken in consultation with the opposition party representatives after the interim report has been received. From the time of its establishment to the end of 2018, the Commission spent approximately €5 million on direct costs, including salaries, admin, overheads and its own legal counsel. The Commission has not provided any estimate of third-party legal costs incurred to date, but they are likely to be substantial, and it would be prudent to assume that the final cost of the Commission could exceed €30 million.
Received the 5th interim report in November and they sought the extension until the end of March 2020. You haven't made a decision in relation to grant that extension at this point in time, but you do state that it's likely to cost in excess of €30 million. Can you give the House an indication of where you arrive at those costs, given that the Commission itself doesn't make that estimate in its interim report? And can you give the House your views in relation to the SiteServe model? Because there is a balance to be struck here in relation to the overall work of the Commission in terms of the truth and also the issue of costs. But there is an issue of public importance here, and the issue of the SiteServe model needs to be concluded. And can I ask you, have you arrived at a decision yourself, which you can clearly outline to the House, which is that the SiteServe model will be concluded and therefore there will be a necessary extension of the time to at least conclude that model, which is of utmost public importance?
I'm not absolutely clear, just from the Taoiseach's answer, on the dialogue between yourself and the Commission of Investigation. The whole idea of commissions of investigation was to make it quicker, more efficient. We've had 5 interim reports, and I think it is reasonable to say that the interim reports to date contain nothing of great substance. It's a chronology of what has been done to date. Can I ask the Taoiseach just specifically, have you written to the Commission to say that you're granting an extension to March of this year? Is that what you're telling us? And has there been any response to that since the request to you, and I was happy to attend at the briefing, and I fully appreciate your concerns in this matter, to balance making sure that there is a full and rigorous investigation, that the full facts are known. But the cost of the investigation is now likely to exceed the total cost of the transactions that are being investigated. And that just doesn't sound right. Can I ask, have you had any response from the Commission of Investigation to your decision as the sponsoring minister to extend the time frame solely to March of this year rather than March of next year as requested? And if you would put the documentation, your letter to the Commission and the Commission's response, if any, on the public record.
Deputy Martin.
Before you just asked the question, I just want to point out that there were 3 questions transferred wrongly, in my view. They were dealing with the Taoiseach's own meetings with Prime Ministers in relation to Brexit, and for some unknown reason they were transferred out to Foreign Affairs. Now my office is dealing with the relevant office, and I think our point has been accepted, but I think we need greater attention. Taoiseach, you might keep an eye on that, because I don't think your Foreign Minister is meeting the Prime Ministers on your behalf, much as he might like to do so. Taoiseach, it will be 4 years, I think, since the IBRC Commission investigation has been established. It was established for a very good reason, which was the real and rising public concern at information emerging about IBRC's sale of public assets at rates which appeared to be well below what should have been sought, and other issues around them. It's quite rightly, I think, now an issue of concern about how inquiries in this country can drag on for so long and at such an expense. 30 million is your estimate now, Taoiseach, and that is an extraordinary figure. And that compares to other countries which do not have the same length of time or the same costs involved. There simply has to be something wrong when a commission, now focused on a single transaction, can take years to do so. I mean, to put it in perspective, there appears to be little more than 3 months involved between the decision to put Siteserve's assets up for sale and the conclusion of that sale. So we will soon perhaps be in the 5th year of investigating a transaction that took 3 months. Now, by any definition, Taoiseach, that is, I'm sure you'll agree, absurd. Taoiseach, have you any idea what the obstacles are which have been put in the path of the Commission? Because this is a private, not a public commission, we do not know if it's been delayed by lack of cooperation, by legal issues, or simply a bad procedure driven by acting as if this were a court with powers beyond those held by a commission. What can be done now, Taoiseach, to get to the bottom of this? Because I think we are owed some detailed explanations, given that we are the body charged with the government of establishing it. We worked in consultation with your predecessor and with yourself in this regard. And would you accept that it's not good enough just to express frustration, but that you have a responsibility to seek a detailed statement of why we're entering into the 5th year of investigation into a transaction which took about 3 months?
Murphy, did you indicate?
Obviously, the context of the letter, and I missed your response, Taoiseach. The context of the letter that you've written to the Commission, in the context of extending the time frame, will be important. I mean, like everyone else, I would share concerns about the delay and costs. Indeed, I'd share those concerns with yourself, but I don't think we can. I would have concerns that that there could be people that would be above being scrutinised if we can't get to a satisfactory conclusion on this.
Thanks, Cian Corley. I'm at a bit of a disadvantage answering these questions because, you know, this is an independent commission under Judge Cregan. I'm not in charge of it. I'm not running it. I'm just the named minister in the Act. So I don't essentially don't actually know and can't know a lot of the questions, answers to the questions that people are asking. What has been done is that I've extended the Commission's time frame until the end of March 2019. And have requested a further interim report on the items I mentioned, any interim findings or conclusions which the Commission is in a position to make at this stage, any options which the Commission believes would reduce the timeframe and or cost for production of a final report in the first module, the Commission's view on the risks to completion of the first module of the investigation within the new requested timeframe, which is the end of March 2020, and the Commission's best estimate of the likely final costs in this first module. That essentially is what's in the letter. I've no difficulty putting it in the public domain unless there's some legal reason as to why I can't. And I haven't. If I have received a response, I haven't seen it yet, but I don't think there has been a response. In terms of the costs are an estimate drawn up by my officials. I indicated back in November that the tentative estimate final cost of the Commission will be between 20 and 25 million, given the rate of expenditure. The Commission's extended timeframe for reporting, at the risk of further delays and the significant third-party legal costs that will arise. The Commission hasn't provided an estimate of the total costs of its own, likely to rise from the first module. But as I said in my reply, I've asked it to provide me with its best estimate in the interim report.